I always believed renting out the small unit behind my house would be simple. The space was neat, the rent was fair, and the neighborhood was safe. When I met Tessa, the young woman who applied for the unit, she seemed polite, shy, and eager to start fresh. I didn't ask many questions. I liked helping people who needed a chance. For the first few weeks, everything felt normal. She paid on time, kept the yard clean, and even brought over a plate of cookies once. But things changed the day her boyfriend, Jackson, appeared. He was tall, restless, and loud in a way that made the air feel uneasy. He barely looked at me when I introduced myself. The first sign of trouble came late one night. I heard heavy footsteps near my backyard shed, followed by a soft metallic clink. I sat up in bed, listening harder. The sound stopped, and I convinced myself it was a raccoon rummaging around. But the next morning, I found faint scratches near the shed's lock. I stared at them for a long time, my stomach tightening. Something felt off, but I didn't want to jump to conclusions. I told myself I was imagining it. But deep down, I knew I wasn't. A few days later, I noticed Jackson staying over more often. His car would appear before sunrise and stay long after midnight. He walked through the yard like he owned the place. Sometimes he even parked on my grass, leaving tire marks I had to fix. One afternoon, I saw him pacing behind Tessa's unit, talking loudly on the phone. His words drifted through the open window. "She doesn't lock anything," he said. "People like her always have stuff." I didn't know if he meant me or Tessa, but either way, the words made my skin crawl. That evening, I checked the shed again. I kept tools there, lawn equipment, power drills, gardening supplies. Nothing expensive, but enough for someone desperate to break into. I tested the lock and felt a slight wiggle. It hadn't felt that loose before. I decided to install a small motion sensor light and a camera above the shed door. I didn't want trouble. I only wanted to protect my property. As I tightened the last screw, I felt eyes on me. I turned and saw Jackson standing behind the fence, staring at me with a blank expression. "You doing repairs?" he asked. "Just keeping things in order," I replied. He nodded slowly, but his eyes never left the shed. That night, the motion light flashed on twice. The first time, I assumed it was a stray cat. The second time, I sat up in bed, alert. I grabbed my phone and opened the camera app linked to the shed. The screen showed only darkness at first. Then, slowly, a shadow moved closer. A figure in a hooded jacket walked into the frame. My heart raced as the person reached for the lock. The hood slipped just enough for me to see the jawline. Jackson. He tried the lock 3 times, each time tugging harder. When it didn't open, he pulled something from his pocket. I couldn't tell what it was, but the metallic glint made me sit straighter. A tool. He inserted it into the lock, twisting it back and forth. The motion light turned on again, flooding the area with brightness. Jackson jerked back, startled, and hurried off toward the back of Tessa's unit. I stared at the screen, stunned. This wasn't curiosity. This wasn't an accident. This was an attempt to break in. My mind spun with questions. Why the shed? What was he looking for? One thing was clear. I needed to talk to Tessa. But I had no idea how complicated things were about to get. The next morning, I walked to Tessa's unit and knocked gently. She opened the door wearing a tired expression, her eyes shadowed. "Oh, hi, Maris," she said, forcing a smile. "Can we talk?" I asked. She hesitated but stepped aside to let me in. The unit looked clean but tense, like someone had rushed to hide something. I cleared my throat. "I saw something last night. On my shed camera." Her face tightened. "Camera?" "Yes. I installed one after noticing scratches on the lock." She swallowed. Did someone try to break in?" I studied her reaction carefully. She seemed nervous, but not surprised. Your boyfriend was there, I said finally. Her shoulders slumped. She sat on the couch and covered her face with her hands. I'm so sorry. I didn't know he'd do something like that. Has this happened before? I asked gently. She shook her head quickly, but her hands trembled. Tessa, I need you to be honest. Is everything okay? She didn't answer. Instead, she stood and walked to the bathroom, closing the door quietly behind her. I waited for several minutes, listening to muffled sniffles. When she finally returned, she whispered, "Please don't call the police." Not yet. That was the moment I realized something deeper was going on. Something she was afraid to say out loud. For the next 2 days, things felt strangely quiet. Jackson didn't come around, and Tessa avoided eye contact whenever I passed her. I didn't push her. I figured she needed time to decide what to tell me. But the silence didn't last. Late Thursday evening, the motion light flashed again. I grabbed my phone immediately. Another notification appeared, motion detected, shed camera. My breath caught. I opened the video feed. There he was again. Jackson. This time he wasn't alone. Another man stood behind him, scanning the yard nervously. Jackson held a crowbar. He pointed at the shed angrily, saying something I couldn't hear, and jammed the crowbar under the lock. My heart pounded. This wasn't a small mistake anymore. This was a crime. The lock bent slightly, but the reinforced metal held. Jackson tried again, harder, but the motion light flooded the yard once more. The second man whispered something urgently, and both of them darted behind Tessa's unit. I stared at my phone, pulse racing. He wasn't trying to steal tools. He was trying to force his way in. Why? What did he think was inside? I knew one thing. This couldn't continue. It was time to make a decision, one I had been avoiding. And tomorrow, I would take the first step. I barely slept after seeing the second break-in attempt. My thoughts spun all night. I needed to protect my property, but I also didn't want to put Tessa in danger. She looked scared the last time we spoke, really scared. Something about this situation wasn't simple. By sunrise, I made a decision. I printed screenshots of the footage, saved all the clips to a folder, and placed everything on a USB drive. If I went to the police, I needed to be fully prepared. Before leaving the house, I checked the shed again. The lock was deeply scratched, and the metal looked bent. It wouldn't survive another attack. As I inspected it, I heard a soft voice behind me. Maris? I turned. It was Tessa. Her eyes were swollen, like she hadn't slept either. Can we talk? She asked. I nodded and followed her into her unit. She sat on the edge of the couch, wringing her hands. I know what you saw, she whispered. And I know you're thinking about the police. I stayed quiet. I tried to stop him, she said. But he doesn't listen to anyone. He thinks you keep something valuable in that shed. What? I asked. Why would he think that? She looked down. I might have said something I shouldn't have. My stomach tightened. Tessa, what did you tell him? She winced. I didn't mean for it to turn into this. I was upset one day, venting, and I told him you always kept the shed locked, like there was something important inside. I didn't think he'd take it seriously. I closed my eyes for a moment. Even something small could lead to trouble if said to the wrong person. He believes there's money in there, she continued. Or electronics. Something worth stealing. There isn't, I said firmly. Just tools. I know, she whispered. But he gets ideas. bad ones. I watched her closely. Why is he still around? Doesn't he work? Doesn't he have somewhere to live? She hesitated. He got fired. And he's been staying here more than he should. I understood what she didn't want to say out loud. He wouldn't leave. Tessa, I said gently, he tried to break into my shed twice. And he brought someone with him. This is serious. Her voice cracked. I'm scared of him, Maris. If you report him, he'll know I told you everything. I softened my tone. I won't mention you. But I can't let him keep doing this. She nodded weakly. I know. But fear still flickered in her eyes. I decided the best thing to do was give her some space. Pushing her might make things worse. So I left her unit quietly and walked back to my house. Every step felt heavy. I sat at my dining table staring at the USB drive. Calling the police seemed like the only option, but part of me worried about what Jackson might do if he found out. People who tried to break into sheds at night didn't usually react well to consequences. Around noon, I heard a car pull into the driveway. I peeked through the blinds. It was a beaten-up truck I had never seen before. The passenger door opened, and Jackson climbed out. My heart thudded. He wasn't supposed to be here during the day. Another man stepped out, the same one from the footage. They walked toward the back unit with fast, angry steps. I grabbed my phone and zoomed in through the window. Their expressions looked tense, like they were arguing. I couldn't hear their words, but I could see their hands waving sharply. A moment later, Tessa appeared at the door. She stepped outside and shut it behind her, blocking them from entering. She looked scared but determined. Jackson pointed toward my house angrily. The other man nodded. A cold wave washed over me. Whatever they were planning now. It wasn't about the shed anymore. My instinct told me to stay inside, stay quiet, and stay out of sight. I watched through the window as the men continued talking in low, hostile tones. Tessa looked like she was begging them to stop. At one point, Jackson stepped toward my fence, gripping the wood so tightly his knuckles went white. He glared at my house with a look that made my stomach twist. I ducked away from the window. I didn't want him to see me watching. A few minutes later, the truck engine roared, and the men drove off. Tessa didn't move until the truck disappeared down the street. Then she sank onto the back step and buried her face in her hands. That was the moment I knew this wasn't just my problem. She needed help too. Real help. After giving her a moment, I walked out to the yard. Tessa? She looked up quickly, wiping her eyes. Did you see that? Yes, I said gently. Are you okay? She shook her head. He's angry. I told him he couldn't come inside anymore. He told me I'd regret it. My stomach tightened again. Listen, I said softly. I'm going to the police today. You don't have to say anything. You don't have to be involved. But I need to report what happened. Her eyes filled with tears. I understand. A long silence passed. Just be careful, she whispered. I took her advice to heart. When I drove to the police station that afternoon, I double-checked my mirrors every few minutes. I didn't see the truck anywhere, but the tension in my chest stayed tight. Inside the station, a calm-voiced officer named Holden listened carefully as I explained everything. I handed him the USB drive and the printed screenshots. He looked through each one with a serious expression. This is clear attempted break-in, he said. Twice. You did the right thing coming in. Is it enough for charges? I asked. With the video? Yes, he said. And we'll conduct a patrol near your property for the next few days. Relief washed over me, slow and warm. When I returned home, Tessa peeked out from her window. I gave her a gentle nod to let her know it was done. She nodded back but didn't smile. She looked exhausted. The rest of the evening was quiet. Too quiet. Even the neighborhood kids seemed to sense something was off. I checked the shed camera before bed. Nothing. But around midnight, just as I started drifting off, the motion light flashed again. My eyes shot open. The notification on my phone popped up instantly. Motion detected, shed camera. And when I opened the video feed, the figure on the screen wasn't Jackson. It was someone I didn't recognize. My hands shook as I held the phone. The video was grainy at first, just movement near the edge of the shed. I squinted, raising the brightness. The figure stepped into the light, and my breath caught hard in my chest. He wasn't big, but he moved with purpose. He wore a hood pulled low, and his hands were gloved. He walked straight to the shed door like he already knew exactly where to go. This wasn't a random stranger. He knew the path. He knew the shed. He knew the lock. I zoomed in on the screen. It wasn't Jackson. It wasn't the other guy. Different height, different build. I sat up in bed, heart hammering. I watched as he tried the lock, tugged on it, then leaned close, like he was listening. After a moment, he stepped back, pulled something from his pocket, and pressed it to the lock. Bolt cutters. My stomach twisted. Before he could snap the metal, the motion light flickered. He froze, then turned his head slightly, just enough for me to see his jawline. He looked young. Maybe late teens. Then he bolted into the darkness. I jumped out of bed, locked every door, and dialed the police number Officer Halden gave me. Someone else tried to break in, I whispered. Someone new. The police arrived fast, blue lights flashing across my lawn like a warning. Officer Halden was with them. He examined the lock with a flashlight, frowning deeply when he saw the fresh marks. This wasn't the same guy, he said. Different pressure points. Different tools. I swallowed hard. Do you think Jackson sent someone? It's possible, he said. People like him often have friends who owe them favors. Tessa peeked out from her door. When I motioned her over, she hurried across the yard, arms wrapped around herself. Is he back? She whispered. No, I said. Someone new. Her eyes widened. Someone else tried? She looked shaken, almost dizzy. Officer Halden stepped closer. Ma'am, do you know anyone who might try to help Jackson? Tessa hesitated. He used to hang out with a group. Not friends exactly. More like guys he partied with. I don't know their names. The officer nodded. We'll add it to the report. For now, keep your doors locked. Both of you. After they left, Tessa and I stood under the porch light, both of us quiet. What do I do? She whispered. You stay inside, I said gently. You stay safe. But as I watched her walk back to her unit, I realized neither of us were safe anymore. The next morning felt different. Heavier. I woke up early and walked the yard, inspecting everything, doors, windows, the fence line. Every crack or sound made me flinch. I checked the camera footage again. The new intruder had approached from the side alley, not the street. He knew the blind spot. That meant planning. Someone had told him where to go. At noon, I gathered the courage to talk to Tessa again. She opened the door slowly, like she expected bad news. Her apartment looked messier than before. Blankets on the floor. Clothes piled in a corner. She rubbed her eyes. I barely slept. I need to ask something, I said. Did you tell anyone else about the shed? She hesitated too long. Then she whispered, "Yes." My chest tightened. "Who?" "A guy named Burke. He used to hang around with Jackson." She swallowed. "I told him Jackson wasn't welcome here anymore." He asked why. I told him about the shed thing. I was upset. I wasn't thinking. "And now you think he might have come last night?" She nodded. "He doesn't like me. Or you." I stepped back, trying to stay calm. This wasn't just one dangerous man. It was two. And maybe more. I realized then. I wasn't dealing with a simple break-in. I was dealing with a group. I spent the afternoon reinforcing the shed lock with a second latch and a metal plate. It wasn't perfect, but it made me feel a little safer. While I worked, Tessa watched from her window, her face pale and tight with worry. When I finished, I went back into the house and checked the cameras again. Nothing new. But the nerves stayed in my stomach like sharp stones. Around sunset, I made dinner but barely ate. I kept glancing at the windows. Listening. Waiting. At 9:07 p.m., there was a soft knock at my door. 3 taps. Slow. Not urgent. My pulse spiked. I hesitated before opening the door a crack. Tessa stood there, hugging her arms. "Can I stay here for a bit?" she whispered. "I keep hearing things." "Of course." She stepped inside, but she didn't sit. She walked straight to the window and peeked through the blinds. "He's not coming back," I said gently. She shook her head. "You don't understand. Burke is worse than Jackson. He doesn't care about rules or police. If he thinks something valuable is here." She trailed off. "Do you think he'll return tonight?" I asked. Her eyes met mine, wide, scared, certain. "Yes," she whispered. "I do." A chill crawled up my spine. Because deep down, I felt the same. We stayed in the living room with the lights off, talking quietly while listening for anything outside. Every rustle of leaves made me tense. Every car passing made her jump. Around 11 p.m., Tessa finally spoke. "I didn't know how bad things would get," she said softly. "I didn't think he'd come here." "It's not your fault," I said. "But we need to stay smart now." She nodded. "If they come again, we can't handle it alone." I checked the cameras again. All clear. But the stillness outside felt suspicious, too calm. Just after midnight, the shed camera triggered again. A single notification. No movement yet, just the sensor picking up shadows. Tessa stiffened beside me. "Check it," she whispered. I opened the live feed. At first, the video was empty. Then something shifted near the fence. A head slowly rose into view. Someone was crouching. Watching the yard. Studying the shed. Not moving toward it yet. Just observing. "Is that him?" Tessa whispered. "I don't know," I murmured. Then the figure stood up fully. The motion light flicked on. And the person didn't flinch. He lifted his head. And looked straight into the camera. A shiver shot through me. He wanted to be seen. The man didn't move. He just stared into the camera with a blank, unreadable expression. The motion light washed his face in a cold, white glow. Tessa pressed a hand over her mouth, eyes wide. "Is that Burke?" I whispered. I think so," she said. "It looks like him." The man took one slow step toward the shed. He wasn't rushing. He wasn't hiding. He acted like he had all night. Like he was daring someone to stop him. My heart pounded. I reached for my phone with shaking fingers. "I'm calling the police," I said. "No," Tessa whispered. "Wait." I turned to her. "Why wait?" She swallowed. "If he hears sirens, he'll run. Then he'll come back again. He always comes back if he doesn't get what he wants." Her voice trembled. "We need them to catch him." I stared at the screen again. He walked slowly around the shed, inspecting every angle like he was choosing the best place to break in. Enough was enough. I stepped back and hit the emergency number. "This is Maris Collins," I said, my voice shaking. "The same man from last night is back. He's at my shed right now." The dispatcher didn't hesitate. "Stay inside. Officers are on the way." The police told me to stay on the line. As I whispered updates, Tessa clung to my arm, staring at the screen like she could will the man away. He tugged once on the shed door. Twice. Then he crouched down again, checking the hinges. "He's planning something," I whispered. The dispatcher's voice was calm. "Officers are 3 minutes out. Do not confront him." The man stood again and stepped closer to the house this time, toward my house. He wasn't trying to hide. He walked right up to the edge of the porch, staring at my windows like he was trying to guess where we were standing. Tessa gasped softly. "He knows we're watching." My chest tightened. I lowered my voice. "He's getting close to the porch." "Stay back from the windows," the dispatcher said. "Help is almost there." The man suddenly reached into his pocket. My breath froze. "Is that a knife?" Tessa whispered. But when he brought his hand out, it wasn't a weapon. It was a screwdriver. Long, sharp, and pointed. He walked to the side of the shed again and knelt down. I whispered into the phone, "He's trying to take off the latch." "Officers are turning onto your street now," the dispatcher said. As if he sensed it, the man jerked his head toward the road. Then he bolted into the darkness. Red and blue lights lit up the yard as 2 cruisers pulled in fast. Officers jumped out, scanning the property with flashlights. Tessa and I hurried to the porch as Officer Halden approached. "He ran that way," I said, pointing toward the alley. Halden nodded and signaled to the others. 2 officers took off running along the side fence, beams cutting through the shadows. "Did he get into the shed?" Halden asked. "No," I said. "But he tried to remove the latch." He inspected it quickly with his flashlight, jaw tightening. He wasn't just looking around. He came prepared. Tessa hugged herself, shaking. "He's dangerous. You have to catch him." "We're trying," Halden said. "But we need more information." Tessa swallowed. "His name is Burke. He hangs out with Jackson sometimes. I think they planned something." Halden exchanged a look with the second officer. 2 people targeting the same property changes things. This isn't random anymore. I felt a cold wave wash over me. "You think they're working together?" "It's possible," Halden said. "Or one is acting for the other." The running officers returned, shaking their heads. "He's gone." Halden turned back to me. "We need to see all your footage again." I nodded. Because deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Not even close. Back inside, we surrounded my laptop as I pulled up the video. The room felt too quiet. Every tiny sound, the clicks, the breathing, even the hum of the fridge, felt sharp. Halden leaned in. "Rewind. I want to see how he entered the yard." I dragged the slider back until the man stepped into view. He slipped through the alley gap with ease, moving confidently. "He knew this blind spot," one officer said. Tessa whispered, "Jackson showed him." "I know he did." When did he talk to Jackson last? Holden asked her. She hesitated. Last week. But Jackson always tells people where I live. He likes causing trouble. Holden wrote that down. That helps. We kept watching. The man circled the shed 3 times before reaching for the latch. Then something made me freeze the screen. Wait. Zoom in. I enlarged the image. There, on the man's wrist, was a bracelet. Thin. Black. Woven. Tessa gasped. Oh no. I know that bracelet. Who does it belong to? Holden asked. She swallowed hard. It doesn't belong to Burke. It belongs to a friend of Jackson's named Merritt. He's worse than both of them. My stomach dropped. So now there are 3? Tessa nodded weakly. 3 men, all tied to Jackson. Heat rose in my chest, fear mixing with anger. My home had become their target. And I wasn't going to let that continue. Holden closed his notebook. Maris, this has officially moved beyond a neighbor dispute. These men are acting as a group. That's coordinated behavior. I felt my hands tighten around the edge of the table. What do we do? We're requesting a patrol car for the next few nights, he said. And I strongly recommend you keep lights on and doors locked. All of them. Tessa sank onto the couch. I didn't know they'd follow me here. I didn't think they'd drag you into it. It's not your fault, I said softly. But now we handle it. Holden pointed to the cameras. Don't delete anything. These clips are strong evidence. We won't, I said. Before leaving, he added, if anything triggers the sensors tonight, call us immediately. When the door shut behind them, the house suddenly felt too quiet again. The weight of everything pressed on my chest. 3 men. 1 shed. 1 target. My property. Tessa looked at me with wide, scared eyes. Do you think they'll come back tonight? I didn't want to answer. But lies wouldn't help either. Yes, I said quietly. I think they will. She hugged herself. What if they get in? I looked toward the dark yard, the shed barely visible under the dim light. Then, I whispered, the cameras will catch everything. But deep inside, I knew the next attempt would be worse. Tessa and I moved quietly through the house, checking every lock twice. The sky outside was dark, the kind of deep darkness that made the yard look endless. I kept glancing at the shed, half expecting a shadow to appear at any moment. Around 10 p.m., I made tea just to keep my hands busy. Tessa paced in small circles, wringing her fingers. What if they come while the police aren't watching, she whispered. We'll see it on the cameras, I said. They can't move without the sensors picking them up. She nodded slowly but didn't look convinced. At 11:30 p.m., a police cruiser rolled down the street. The officer inside gave a small wave before parking near the corner. It eased my nerves, just a little. By midnight, Tessa had fallen asleep on the couch. I covered her with a blanket, then sat near the window with my laptop open to the live feed. The yard was still. Silent. 1 a.m. Nothing. 1:20 a.m. Still nothing. My eyelids grew heavy. Then, at 1:42 a.m., my phone buzzed violently in my hand. Motion detected, backyard. My heart slammed awake. I clicked the feed instantly. A figure stepped into view. Then another. And then a third. 3 men stood at the back of my yard, each one wearing dark clothing. They moved with purpose, whispering, pointing, huddling like they were planning their next move. My blood went cold. Wake up, I whispered, shaking Tessa gently. They're here. Her eyes shot open. What? All of them? Yes. She clapped a hand over her mouth when she saw the screen. That's Burke, and Merritt, and, oh no, Jackson. My stomach dropped. I hadn't seen Jackson before, but the way he stood, straight, confident, almost proud, made everything worse. He pointed at my shed, and Burke nodded. Merritt dug something out of his backpack. A crowbar. I grabbed my phone and dialed the emergency number with shaking fingers. They're here, I whispered. 3 men. They're trying to break in. The dispatcher's voice sharpened instantly. Officers are responding. Stay inside. On the screen, Jackson walked up to the shed and tried the door. Locked. He smirked. Then he signaled for the crowbar. Tessa whispered, he's doing this to hurt me. No, I said softly. He's doing this because they think no one will stop them. As Burke slid the crowbar under the latch, the motion light clicked on, bright and blinding. And the men finally realized. They were being recorded. The bright floodlight startled them, but only for a moment. Burke cursed and jerked back. Merritt shielded his face. But Jackson? He walked right up to the camera. Smirking. Staring right into the lens like he wanted me to know he wasn't afraid. Tessa whimpered behind me. He's letting you see him. He wants to scare you. It was working. But the police were already on their way. I zoomed in on the feed. Jackson lifted the crowbar himself this time, gripping it like he knew exactly where to apply pressure. Metal squealed. The latch bent. He's getting it open, I whispered. My heart raced. That shed held nothing valuable, just tools, garden supplies, an old lawnmower, but this wasn't about stealing. This was about control. About sending a message. Jackson glanced over his shoulder. Hurry up, he seemed to mouth to the others. Burke grabbed the side panel, pulling hard. Merritt watched the alley nervously. Then. Sirens. Loud. Close. The men froze. Jackson's expression finally cracked, anger flashing across his face. He dropped the crowbar and bolted toward the alley. Burke ran after him. Merritt stumbled, tripping over the side of the shed before scrambling to his feet. They sprinted as fast as they could. But the police were faster. Flashlights cut through the night. Officers shouted commands. The sound of running feet echoed through the alley. It's happening, I whispered. They're caught. At least, that's what I hoped. Tessa and I ran to the front window in time to see 2 officers pinning Burke to the ground. Another officer chased Merritt, yelling for him to stop. A 4th officer sprinted down the alley after Jackson. I held my breath, palms pressed to the cold glass. Jackson darted between 2 yards, but the pursuing officer was fast, much faster than I expected. A loud shout echoed through the night, followed by the heavy thud of footsteps and a barked command. Get on the ground. Hands behind your back. Seconds later, another voice responded. He's restrained. I exhaled so hard I almost collapsed. An officer knocked at my door a minute later. I opened it quickly. Ms. Collins, he said. We have all 3 in custody. Tessa burst into tears, not loud sobs, but quiet, shaking relief. I put an arm around her as the officer continued. They'll be charged with attempted burglary, property damage, trespassing, and we're adding harassment since you had prior reports. He glanced toward Tessa. And Ms. Arlo, you'll need to provide a statement about your connection to them. She nodded, wiping her eyes. I'll tell you everything. The officer turned back to me. Your cameras saved this case. Without them, these men would have walked away tonight. I looked out at the shed, the latch broken, but the danger gone. For the first time in days, I felt safe. The next morning felt unreal. Sunlight poured across the yard, warming the grass and glinting off the broken latch on the shed. But instead of fear, I felt relief wash over me. Tessa sat at the table with a cup of tea, looking exhausted but lighter somehow. "I can't believe they're really gone," she said softly. "They won't bother you again," I replied. "Or me." She nodded. "I'm sorry I brought all this here. I never thought Jackson would follow me. I never thought he'd drag his friends into something so awful." "It's not your fault," I said gently. "You left because you were trying to get away. That's brave." She smiled weakly. "I'm moving out next week. Not because of you, because I want to start fresh. This time in a place they can't find." "I understand," I said. "And I hope you find somewhere peaceful." Later, Officer Halden stopped by to give the final update. "All 3 men confessed," he said. "Your footage made it impossible for them to deny anything. They'll be facing real consequences." I thanked him, truly grateful. When he left, I walked out to the shed. The damaged latch hung crooked, a reminder of the chaos. But the fear attached to it was gone. I straightened up, breathed in the cool morning air, and smiled. My home was mine again. And because I fought back, because I didn't stay silent, it would stay safe.